Yeah, so I almost just videoed my recorded my entire desktop, and I was like, I don't know if I want people seeing my 4chan thread in here. All right, this is maybe going to be a quick one. This is just kind of off the cuff. It's not. This isn't an important video, guys. Okay. All right. Keep your work life and your personal life separate. I know that sounds really, really obvious, right? I know that it's like people are like, "Oh yeah, that's fucking obvious, right?" It's like, well, I hear too many people that are like, "I can't use Linux because my work requires that my personal computer that I bought with my own money runs Windows, so I can work remotely on a computer that they do not provide me." Now, that kind of gets into the broader culture of this bullshit work from home thing, where I'm kind of more of a do everything on office time kind of person, you know? That's just me. I think that my job ends when I leave the fucking door, but whatever. Hello, doggy. Hello, doggy. What you doing? My dog thinks I have food, and he's right. But anyways, yeah. So I talked about this in my other video where about the 30-day Linux challenge bullshit, and I kind of want to reiterate that is your work computer should not be the same as your home computer because when you succumb to your boss telling you what kind of software you can run on your system, that's how you get spyware. You know what I mean? That's how you get security holes is when your work dictates the kind of software you have. And obviously this helps just for if you're not into computers as a hobby, that's kind of a different thing. But I would say that most people that watch my channel are at least into computers as some sort of hobby. And when you do that, you need to get your own system. You know what I mean? You gotta have like a computer dedicated to work where you have to run whatever the fuck your work needs, and then you need to get a computer that you can do whatever you want on. So that way there's no bullshit excuse like my work requires that I use Windows, so therefore my entire personal life must use Windows too. And I just don't think that's a good mentality to have. And obviously this means because your work probably is going to have you run a bunch of proprietary garbage. So when you don't need to run proprietary garbage, guess what? You can use Linux, which makes it very awesome. But yeah, there's just too much of this like too many people tell me like, "Oh yeah, I want to use Linux, but because my work computer uses Windows, that means I'm using Windows." And it's like, not really. That's not really the case. That just means that what you do for work, which you just have to use whatever, there's no getting around that. That just means that your work life uses Windows. But I mean, shit, my work gave me a fucking cheap Android phone and I ran whatever the fuck they wanted on it. I don't care. It's not my phone. you know. Well, it's my phone now. They gave it to me, but I think I threw it away. Uh, but anyways, yeah, like your and my dad does this too. He uses like a work. He uses his Mac for work, and he uses that as his personal computer too. So this dude has not bought a phone or a computer in like the last 20 years. You know what I mean? So he's like completely oblivious to the market. But like for me, obviously, I don't use a computer for work. I don't think I ever have. So I run whatever I want to on my computer because it's my personal computer. So mine has like a shit ton of wires coming out of it. I've got like massive speakers hooked up to it. It's wonderful. And I think this didn't really need to be a 4-minute video. But that's really all I had to say. It's just try when you're recommending Linux to somebody, the idea is give them a separate computer that may work better with Linux because what happened in the Linus Tech Tips video was like the opposite of what happened in the craft computing video. So in the Linus Tech Tips video, Linus had a computer that he decided, okay, well, I'm going to one pretend I'm an idiot and I'm going to pretend that I'm like a Windows using gamer that doesn't understand anything about anything and can't read. That's cool. But he said, I'm going to put this on my personal computer. And that was the right idea. Do not use it for your work computer, even though his excuse was his work computer is basically only used for word processing, which would have honestly made a better option, ironically, because his personal computer, meanwhile, had like a bunch of exotic fucking hardware in it, shit that I don't even own. And if I had been building a computer with Linux in mind, I would not have bought the same stuff he bought because I would know it wouldn't work, you know? So he had this problem where it's like, oh, my computer doesn't work with Linux because I have a 5,000 fucking dollar computer and all this proprietary Corsair bullshit. So Linux sucks because it doesn't run my Windows specific hardware. And I don't think that's right. So Craft Computing, meanwhile, had the opposite problem. He said, I'm going to get a computer specifically for Linux. I'm going to get myself a System 76 computer. I'm going to put Linux on it, but I'm going to use it for work where my workflow is like extremely dependent on proprietary software. And so he had the same problem. Except his computer worked fine, just none of his software worked. Linus had the problem where uh, his software ideally should have been fine, but his computer was not fine. And of course, he had problems with the software because, like I tell people, I've kind of gone away from recommending Linux to people. People sometimes ask me that. They're like, "Oh, I know you use Linux. My friends use Linux. I want to try Linux. What do I do?" And I'm like, stick to Windows. Just ignore it. Just leave that to the people that have fucking days on end to troubleshoot, you know? Because, like, while my Bazzite installation, it works fine out of the box, it barely needs any configuration. The most trouble I have is with DistroBox. And honestly, I can work around that. So, and obviously, I'm using an Atomic distro, so DistroBox isn't something I would necessarily need. But um, when when Linux works for me, I mean, I've spent like 10 years getting to this point where I can just install a distro and it just works, you know? Like most of the time that doesn't fucking happen for me. There's always like some sort of issue. But Bazzite has been pretty good about that. So if you want like my honest recommendation, Bazzite's actually really nice. And I feel stupid for using a gaming distribution when obviously I can use Gentoo or whatever the fuck else I want. You know, I can use any distro I want except Slackware because Slackware is just too much of a pain in the ass. Um, ironically, because despite its name Slack, you know, like you would think it would be the lazy man's distro, but no, it requires so much fucking effort, and I'm like, what the fuck? So, you know, but I decided to use a simple distro for my computer. I want one that just does everything, you know, out of the box without a lot of effort, you know. And that works for me because I have built my computer with the explicit purpose of Linux. Uh, I don't buy anything that's Windows specific. I make sure that all my peripherals, I make sure everything is going to work well with what I need it to. And that's something that a lot of people might run into because I think your average person won't have any issues with this because they fucking run some normal ass laptop that doesn't have a dedicated graphics card or anything. So they should be fine with Linux, but these people that like, you know, it's really funny, right? That I always say I am an idiot, and that's actually part of my testing is I don't have to pretend to be an idiot. I just can be an idiot when I need to. And despite knowing some things about what I'm doing, I am like the bare minimum of what documentation needs to be in order for it to pass the idiot test. Basically, I'll leave it for a few months and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to come back to this documentation because I'm going to reinstall and I'm going to need to read this again. So I'm going to read back through my own documentation, and if I can't understand it or if I'm missing information, I know that I need to add that to the documentation because that means everybody's missing that information. So we've got this thing where we need to like I want to say that Linux is pretty idiot proof at this point if you're running something like Bazzite, but I know that there that people are gonna run into issues. So I try not to, if they're on Windows and Windows is working for them, I'm like, just fucking stick to it and just leave it alone. Leave it alone. Oh my god, you don't want to play with the computer spirits, man. Because that's what people do is they fuck around and they find out. Basically, they one guy actually he's been switching back and forth from Windows to Linux, and I want this dude to like shut the fuck up and stop telling him to switch to Linux because he's obviously having a good time on Windows. Just fucking leave it. He gets kind of annoying talking about how great Windows is and how shitty Linux is, but who gives a shit? You know what I mean? But there's this guy that keeps telling him, "Oh, you got to switch back to Arch Linux. Arch Linux is the best." So he does it, and now he's gotten to the point where his Windows USB doesn't work. So now he's stuck on Linux. And I'm like, well, that's one way. That's one way to solve your hopping problem. But I told him, I said, I'm kind of afraid that you're gonna like shred your SSD because while SSDs have a pretty good lifespan, that there's also this problem where if you make one bad write, it can just torch your drive. I don't know why the fuck that happens, but I've had so many just random drives fail on me, and it applies to hard drives too. But drives are super fragile. Like I'm always afraid to write to a drive, honestly, because I know that it can like corrupt my data. It can just break, and I'll never be able to use it again, and I gotta swap it out. That's just how it goes. Drives don't last forever, so I've got like 3 backups of everything I need. But he has now gotten to the point where I think he torched his drive, and luckily Linux can still read and write to it, but Windows can no longer boot. So that's cool. Um, but yeah, like I don't know. Can I? What the fuck was I talking about again? I was talking about keeping your work and personal life separate, and it's gone on like a 11-minute tangent. So that's more information than I wanted to bring up, but it's a lot of stuff I've been thinking about, and I haven't made a video in a bit. So there you go. Thanks.